Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
What's going on, super friends? Welcome to this week's show. My guest today is a published author and behavioral investigator, as well as a fellow instructor on Udemy. She's a professional people watcher, speaking, researching, and cracking the code of interesting human behavior for audiences around the world. Her groundbreaking workshops and courses teach individuals like you and I how to succeed in relationships and in life by understanding the hidden dynamics of people. Besides being a HuffPost columnist and a Penguin author, she's been featured on NPR, The Wall Street Journal, The Today Show, and even USA Today. She's even written for CNN, Fast Company, and Forbes. Cool fact, by the way, she was actually trained by Dr. Paul Ekman, who is the real-life version of the main character on the popular show Lie to Me. You'll notice that we dive pretty deep and geek out on body language and charisma really fast. The end result, though, is an interview jam-packed with usable tips and inspiring anecdotes that will get you sitting up straight and paying much more attention to the image you're presenting. I know you're going to enjoy it. And now, I'm pleased to present to you Miss Vanessa Van Edwards. Vanessa, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for making time in your busy schedule. I know you're super busy right now.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Awesome, and we're happy to have you. So, wow, you've accomplished quite a bit, and I've been following you since we're both instructors on Udemy, and I know that you've gone from being a top instructor to really an incredible success story with public speaking and doing your own consulting work. Tell us, what started it all? Like, how did you get into body language to begin with?
You know, I always have had a fascination with how people work. I think it's because I never really felt like I got people. And so I wanted to study them. I joke that I'm a recovering awkward person because I just never understood social niceties. And so I dove into sort of the psychology and the sociology of people and very quickly discovered this whole interesting set of science on body language. And so really I did it for myself at the very beginning. And once I started using it, it just completely changed my interactions.
You know, it's funny. I have a very similar story, and body language has always been a really big subject for me and something I'm super interested in, to the extent that one of the first books I read when I became a speed reader, besides a lot of this like body mechanics and kinesiology stuff, was actually Barbara and Alan Peace's book on body language.
Yeah, it's a great book.
And just incredible. I mean, everything you could imagine is in that book, and I really loved it. But for the uninitiated, maybe share a bit of background about body language, what it means, and a little bit about how it's applicable in our daily lives.
Sure. So what we don't realize is that when we're thinking about communication, we often focus on the words we use. So what we want to say when we're going into a job interview or we're going on a date, we think about what we want to tell them, what our verbal answers should be. And most of school and education is focused on verbal, right? We learn a lot about language communication, written communication, the words we use. However, there's a huge amount of our communication that is behind the words. It's with our face, our voice tone, and our body. Somewhere between 60 and 93% of our communication is nonverbal. And that's a kind of a big range, but the most important thing to know is that it's the majority. The majority of our communication is nonverbal. And you know this, like for example, we're on a podcast right now, so we're just doing audio. But if I were to say, oh yeah, she's a really great girl, you would know, even just from my voice tone, right? Like you don't believe a word that I'm saying, right? What you believe is the tone that I'm using. And so we don't realize how much impact our nonverbal is having on our messaging. And so that's, I think, the importance of nonverbal, the sort of basics that if you haven't given your nonverbal much thought, it's super important for how you deliver your messaging.
Absolutely. You know, I have to admit, when I started learning about body language, I found it actually freaky how dramatically I could change people's perceptions and reactions with really basic modifications.
they're very small. It's not like we're talking about, a complete makeover. They're very, very small things that have huge impact.
So what are some of those small things?
So I think that the biggest one is being congruent. So I really don't like it when people talk about body language for manipulation or body language for like tricking people. I think that doesn't work for a number of reasons. First of all, it's not very ethical. Okay. Basically, I don't like the way that feels. But most importantly, it actually doesn't work very well. And what I mean by that is the most powerful nonverbal highlights your words or your feelings. So when you are speaking, you want to make sure that your body is in alignment with your words. So for example, I see this all the time in elevator pitches, and I want you to think about your elevator pitch. Your elevator pitch is the answer that you give when someone says, "So what do you do?" So I want you to think about that answer for just a second. And you've probably said that answer 1,000,000 times, right? You have it so down pat, so memorized. And if you like what you do, that can, even the fact that you've said it 1,000,000 times can actually sap the joy and energy out of what you actually do. And if you don't like what you do, that can often leak out with your nonverbal. So I'll be asking someone, "So what do you do?" And they'll say, "Oh, I'm a kindergarten teacher." Kind of like side. And I can't tell, do they hate being a kindergarten teacher? Because it sure sounds like they're very tired of it. Are they tired of answering that question? Are they reevaluating whether or not they should be a kindergarten teacher? I don't know, because her nonverbal doesn't match or doesn't give us any additional information to her words. So the most basic thing I can tell you is when you're thinking about your elevator pitch, how can you add emotionality into your pitch? So how can you add a voice tone or a hand movement that's going to help add to how you truly feel about what it is you do? And I hope that you love what you do. If you don't love what you do, then we got to work on that too. But hopefully you love what you do. And I don't want you to get sucked into the saying it so many times the same way.
Right. And suddenly actually wishing that we did a video podcast. But
I know, but you know what? It's helpful to do for audio because so many of us do phone calls in business, especially, right? We're doing audio conferences, we're Skype audioing, and we forget that we have a lot of nonverbal communication that comes through our voice tone. So if you were to ask me what I did and I were to say, "Oh, I'm Vanessa, I run a human behavior research lab in Portland, Oregon." Like, it's kind of interesting, but you're like, forgettable. Why? Because I said it 1,000 times. I didn't add any emphasis or tonality. Whereas let's say that I add some warmth to that. So warmth comes through in your voice when you change the emphasis of your words. You can also add engagement by changing your facial expression. So I'm going to change my facial expressions, even though you can't see me. That's still going to come through my voice. So I'll try it again. If I say, "My name is Vanessa. I run a human behavior research lab in Portland, Oregon." So I actually opened up my face that time by smiling and also raising my eyebrows. And that actually comes through in my voice tone. It actually opens up my voice tone. So I actually like, the audio side is interesting because we forget how much our face and our body changes the way that we sound.
Right. And actually, I noticed when I was doing a little bit of pre-research, stalking, if you will, that you and I share a favorite book of all time, which is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that's my favorite chapter in the book I believe the title of the chapter is just Smile.
Yeah. And so let me explain some of the science behind that. So yes, we are total Dale Carnegie junkies. We can geek out on that as much as you like. I think that my favorite part of the book is that it's extremely practical. One thing that I wish that someone would do, I've thought about doing it myself, but I wish it was someone from the Dale Carnegie agency, to add the science into his book, because he actually has some very, very good concepts that have been backed up by research. For example, he talks about the power of smiling. I think it's really important to understand where certain tips come from because it can help you remember them. So there's something called the facial feedback hypothesis, which basically says that not only do our emotions cause our face, but our face also causes our emotions. So in other words, when you're happy, you smile. And when you smile, you actually begin to feel more happy. And the reason for this is because it's the basis for empathy that we have in our face muscles that mirror or mimic anyone that we see. Whenever we look at a facial expression, like you look at a picture of someone on LinkedIn or you're watching a scary movie, your face will actually begin to mirror the people on the screen without you even realizing it. And that is the basis for empathy, because our brain goes, oh, if we copy the other person's face, we begin to feel as they feel.
Right.
And so that is why when you add a smile, which is a very simple thing to do, but I'll even say opening up your face. So relaxing your eyebrows so they're not furrowed, dropping your eyelids so that they're nice and loose so that they're not tense on the lower lids. Even just that, opening up your face, can really help literally bring warmth into your voice tone, because it helps relaxes you from that facial feedback hypothesis loop.
Right. And I'm sure many people in the audience have seen this TED Talk that went viral, which basically demonstrated how changing our body language can actually make us more confident or more happy. And the classic example she gives is, before you go into a job interview, put your hands up in the air in a victory pose.
Yes. And so it's funny because I always stand while I record podcasts. So I'm standing right now. I have a standing desk.
As am I, actually.
Yeah. And the reason why that's important is because while I do that, I'm firmly planted. And there's a lot of research that shows that our brain sort of operates in the 3 Fs, which is freeze, flight, or fight. And that's when we get nervous. And so if you're asking me hard questions, and I'm a little bit nervous, and I'm actually an introvert, so I get a little bit nervous on podcasts, I want to feel like I'm firmly planted so that I can disengage that freeze, fight, or flight response and be able to respond more calmly. And that has to do with, okay, I'm firmly planted. I feel stable. I then begin to release more testosterone, and testosterone for both men and women is the strength hormone. And that helps me keep my voice tone nice and low, which is how you gauge my competence or confidence levels, as well as speaking at a not breathless pace. So making sure that I'm very rhythmic with my speaking. So all of those things tie into how I'm holding my body. And that's one of the reasons why I stand while I give podcasts. So if you do phone calls, I highly recommend standing. I even will talk to clients about doing standing meetings, especially if you're talking about tense topics. Sometimes that can help people feel less afraid.
Yeah, and it does a great job rushing the meeting along because nobody wants to stand for an hour. Exactly. How long do those physiological changes last? I mean, if I were to stand every day and pull my shoulders back and have an open chest and not cross my body, I mean, am I making long-term changes to my confidence levels?
Well, what's interesting is it's a positive feedback loop. So, for example, let's say that you change your body language, you start to stand in sort of a victory pose. And victory posing, it's good, but it's a little socially aggressive. So you have to be just really careful where you do it. It'd be really bad if, and I was talking to some people who'd watched that TED Talk, they were like power posing in the bathroom and like the person who was interviewing them walked in and they were like, So I call it launch stance, which I prefer, which is less socially aggressive, which is when you have your hands and arms nice and loose by your sides, you always have space between your torso and your arms. Mm-hmm. That helps you be a little broader. You roll your shoulders down your back as far as possible. And you keep your chest, chin, and forehead pointed up towards the sun. So that's like almost like a Superman without your hands behind your hips. It's a very, very strong pose, but if someone were to walk by you, it wouldn't be weird.
Yeah.
So let's say that you go into victory pose, you go into launch stance, and you begin to release testosterone, the strength hormone, and decrease your cortisol, the stress hormone. And that causes you to feel more confident because you lose the stress hormone and you gain the strength hormone. Well, as you begin to feel more confident, you begin to answer questions really well. You begin to smile more. You begin to act more confident, which then in turn causes you to stand more confident, which encourages you to act more confident. So it's hard to say how long it would last because you're already building on a positive feedback loop. Right? If you were to stand in that position for 5 minutes, then immediately go into low power or neutral body language, probably not as long. But the whole point of doing that is that you're engaging your body and your mind in a very positive loop that encourages you to be better and better and better and better.
And so eventually you can essentially hardwire these to be habits.
Exactly. I like to encourage my students to rely on muscle memory. So a lot of these studies are fascinating, right? I mean, you read books on body language and you're like, cool, interesting. And maybe you take away like 1 or 2 tips. Whereas I think that the reason for that is because the science is interesting, but it's not inspiring enough to actually change things. So the way that I like to build my courses, I like to build muscle memory into it, where I'm having you do activities and practicums where you're doing it enough where it feels natural. So after a while, you don't even think about doing it. Like you're doing it without even thinking about it.
Yeah, I've gotten to a point where it actually feels unnatural for me to cross my body in a social situation. And one of my favorite hacks, I spend a lot of time going to networking events and things like that. And one of my favorite hacks is to go up to somebody, who is kind of in the corner and kind of, I feel like I can chat with them and just kind of recommend that they take the drink, the classic L-shaped elbow with the drink in front of them. And I kind of recommend, why don't you hold it in such a way that it's not crossing your body, and see if then you feel a little bit more comfortable and more motivated to talk to people.
I have a question about that. So yeah. I have found, and you can tell me if you're wrong, that when I give unsolicited advice like that, people freak out at me a little bit. Not freak out at me, but they'll be like, oh yeah, cool, thanks. But afterwards they're like, ugh, it feels kind of invasive. And when that's been done to me, for example, if I've been at events with other body language experts where they'll give me advice or something like that. And that was before I even really was doing anything professionally with it. I also sort of found it kind of invasive. Have you ever had a bad response to that?
Yeah. So I always start with, hey, want to try a weird experiment?
Okay.
So it's a lot of selling. But yeah, it's kind of a really strange thing to do among the many strange social experiments that I like to do. So yeah. I've never gotten a really negative response.
That's good. I would be curious to see if you ask someone after the fact, a few weeks or days later, how did that go for you? How did that feel for you? The sad part is you're coming from such a good place, right? You just want to help them. You want to help them be able to meet more people and make more connections. And it's really hard because sometimes they take it the wrong way. And I've had to be really careful with that one.
Right. Absolutely. It definitely comes from a place of, yeah, I've been that guy in the corner, crossing myself and kind of taking up as little space as I possibly can.
Yeah, I know. We've all been there. And that's why I hope that us talking about it can help people self-autocorrect.
Well, on that note, how hard is it to train yourself to have different body language? Is it something that can take, I know for me, it took a while, but for the average person, does it take days, weeks, months?
Yeah. So from our research, we have a database of about 40,000 people who have done our body language program. And so we're able to now look at their we give people basically tests at the beginning and tests at the end. So we're able to see their progress, and we're also able to check in with them pretty frequently to follow up on their progress. And that's how we help our students check in with themselves, but also we want to keep improving our own program. What we found is that typically it takes someone 3 to 5 days per each skill. So there are 30 different body language skills that we teach that range from, head to toe. So you can do multiple ones at the same time if you want, although we encourage no more than 1 or 2 at a time, just because it's really hard to focus on all of them at once. And so if you're really going at it, a few weeks, you can master them. But otherwise, we encourage you to sort of trickle them over a few months. And what's interesting is when you do it slowly like that, you have longer changes. The same thing as doing a fad diet. Yeah, you can starve yourself and lose a ton of weight and have, really good body language for a few weeks. But slowly old habits begin to creep in. So if you take it a little bit slower, you end up keeping them for longer. And we found that people, when they do that, they tell us that people in their office or friends will see them and be like, hey, did you get a haircut? Have you lost weight? Mm-hmm. You look great. And they can't figure out exactly what it is about the person that looks so good or that feels so good. And, we know that it's because they're actually changing the way that they're holding themselves. So it's really funny to hear how people pick up on those changes.
Right. That's super interesting. And also you mentioned a few times elevated testosterone, which is something I've also been really interested in and experimenting with, the idea of pheromones. And, people can tell when you're emitting more testosterone, when you have a more dominant presence. And it's just a really, really interesting thing that, even body language aside, if you walk by somebody, they notice your presence if you're kind of emitting this alpha pheromone presence.
I don't study pheromones that much. Have you seen studies that talk about testosterone specifically? I haven't seen that study. That's super cool.
I haven't seen studies. I'm going off a lot of anecdotal evidence from myself and Tim Ferriss and a lot of these other biohackers who play around with this. As you can imagine, in the gentleman community, there's quite a few of us who are interested in the pursuit of having more of an alpha presence.
Yeah. I think pheromones are super interesting. That's why I was asking about studies, because I think that pheromones are sort of the next frontier in what we're going to be talking about. I think that body language science is getting really robust. I think that pheromones and brain behavior is going to be the next frontier. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, I need to do some actual hard research on it. I don't have any excuse not to, really.
But it's hard. It's hard to find the right studies and really good ones. So I feel you on that.
Absolutely. Vanessa, you mentioned 30 techniques, and I'm really curious, what are, being a believer in the 80-20 rule, what are a couple of those techniques that are most impactful for your average client?
If I gave you the ones that are most impactful, they wouldn't make sense because it's like a foundational sort of thing. So we build upon knowledge. I would say that the biggest one to focus on if you're going to do things first is the power body language that we already talked about. That's like the most basic introduction thing that if you can nail never closing your body windows, you can rely on that muscle memory. It will help everything else. So for example, when we talk about the body, we talk about different body windows. So you have a head window, a torso window, and a leg window. And what that means is like every time you block or cross something, that window closes. So crossing your legs or putting your hands in your lap, that would be closing the leg window. Crossing your arms or putting your purse or computer or notebook in front of your chest, that would be closing your torso window. And eye blocking, biting your nails, putting your hand over the bottom of your face as you're thinking, those are all closing your head window. And eye blocking specifically, by the way, is like when you will pinch the bridge of your nose, rub your eyes. Sometimes people will kind of cover the top of their forehead, like they put the tips of their fingers to the side of their forehead. That's actually a shame gesture. All of those things are two kinds of indicators. First, they indicate to others that you are weak. Right? When we're talking about alpha behavior, they indicate to others that you are feeling uncomfortable, that you are either fearful or anxious or getting into high stress mode. And even people who say, but I'm just more comfortable with my arms crossed over my chest. Yes, that brings me to the second indicator. So the second indicator is that you are indicating to yourself that you need to go into self-protection mode.
Yep.
So when we cross our arms over our chest, of course we feel more comfortable because our arms are blocking and protecting our most vital organs. So it's much harder for someone to attack us. So that's why you often see teenagers, teenage boys especially, will almost always have very closed body language because that actually makes them feel more protected. They feel like they're protecting themselves. So the most important thing, and this is okay, sure, 20% of the most important thing, because if you can nail it, everything else becomes easier, is relying on testosterone producing body language, but making sure that you always have all three of your windows open, that you're not engaging in any kind of eye blocking behavior, that you're not engaging in self-soothing. So putting your hands in your mouth or touching the lower half of your face or playing with your tie or your jewelry, that you're not crossing your arms in front of your chest or clutching a purse or grabbing a computer. Or people even do it with their coffee cups where they'll kind of grip their coffee cup in front of them. If you can keep all those windows open to the point where you don't even think about it anymore, that's the most important 20% of that 80-20 rule.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. We talk about, what feels comfortable. And ever since I've kind of learned and I know better than crossing and closing these windows, you sometimes, once you're in a really uncomfortable situation or I'm feeling a lack of confidence, I catch myself doing excuse movements. So I'll, roll my sleeves up and then 2 minutes later decide that I want to roll them down because that allows me to cross my body, right?
Sure.
And it's like the body knows how you're feeling and it's going to express itself.
Yeah, I mean, you are training your body to stand that way, to uncross, but you're also training your mind to be okay with the discomfort. So as you said, like your body goes, oh, I better unroll or roll up my sleeves. It's also training your mind to say, we're okay. Like, yes, we're a little nervous in this business meeting or we're a little nervous in this networking event, but it's okay. You know who you are. You know who you want to meet and what you want to say. So it's an interesting mind-body kind of feedback loop. And that is truly what alphas do. When we're looking at alpha behavior, and I love studying alphas. I love it. I bring alphas into my lab all the time. And I just love it. It's funny. I work out at the gym here in Portland, 24-hour fitness. And I have a trainer that I work with and he knows I'm on alpha patrol. So like I will watch for both male and female alphas, but typically in the gym, I see male alphas. And when I see a male alpha, I will almost always approach them to come into my lab because you can tell by how they walk, by how they move, by how they survey the room, by their physical assets. And so my trainer is like always makes fun of me for being on the prowl for subjects. Because I like to bring those people into the lab. And so, yeah, when we're talking about alpha behavior, we're talking about the ability to be able to manage stress, both physically and mentally, where you are able to tell your body how you want it to act and how you want it to stake your claim and have a presence where you are. And then you're telling your mind basically to get on board with it because you know that you do have a physical presence and you do belong where you want to be.
Can anybody become alpha? Can anybody kind of learn to demonstrate alpha presence?
I believe so. And that is one of the reasons why I bring alphas into the lab, is because we study what they do down to eye tracking behavior. I mean, everything that they do, how they act. And then we try to train people to do it, to see how does it feel? How does it look? Does it feel natural? Does it change their physiology? Does it change their hormone levels? Does it change their first impression? Like, for example, can we train someone to change their first 7 seconds, their first impression, by using alpha cues in an authentic way so they feel like they really are truly owning their presence? And can that change the first 3 words that someone thinks of when they rate them? So we do a couple of first impression experiments in our lab where we show someone a picture, a video, or have them look at them in person. And we ask them, what are 3 words to describe this person? And we only give them 5 seconds to do it. So they get like either a 1 second view of the person up to 7 seconds. And they have to write down the 3 words that come to their mind for that person. Sometimes we even have them do multiple choice depending on what we're doing. And what we'll do is we'll try to alter that first impression. So we'll try to do things with that person to see if we can change the words. It's fascinating to see what happens. And I do believe, and again, this is not published yet, but I do believe that you can adopt alpha cues.
So then it becomes a little bit of a chicken and the egg, because if you improve your actual confidence level at the psychological level, your body language will follow. And as we discussed before, if you improve your body language, your psychological confidence will improve. Which one typically happens first?
I think in our case, now remember, it's a little biased because we're teaching nonverbal first. So I would say it starts with nonverbal, but I'm sure that there are people who would argue the other way, that if you fix the mind, then that the body follows. So we're a little biased that we teach body language, but I will say that it's hard to separate the two in a certain sense. For example, one of the things that we teach is like a success routine, which is like a mental prep along with your body language. And one specific guy, he came into our lab and we were working with him, and he had a big conference that he wanted to go to. And we gave him a couple of strategies, both mental and physical. And he came back and he looked like a different person. Like, he looked more relaxed, more happy. He looked taller. And I know for a fact he wasn't taller. So it was like, and the women in the lab where we were like, we can't believe it. Like, this guy looks like a different guy. Like, it looks like he's been through a life change. And it was something that he did at the conference where he started off a little bit more confident, but because he had a little bit more confident, he had a good conversation with someone, he got a business card early on, then he got another business meeting early on. Those little tiny wins sort of snowballed into this really interesting where he felt like he just, in his words, I dominated that conference.
Wow.
And it was like these very small changes that he did. And we gave him tiny things. We can't take any credit for it, but it was amazing how much that changed for him.
That's really inspiring.
It was amazing. Now, he makes it worth it. Like, he makes all the experiments that don't go right, all the hard stuff that we do in our lab, he makes it worth it.
Amazing. So I understand we covered body language, we covered vocal intonation, but really you specialize in, I guess I would call it overall charisma and presence. Are we missing any other component?
Yeah, there's one other thing that I would say to think about. And, it's hard to separate nonverbal and people skills and charisma. They're all so tied together, as you know. And I think that I try to get people to focus on is this charisma is sort of this weird, mysterious term that no one can quite define. And science has defined it for us. And research has found that charisma is this blend of warmth and competence. So you're able to show credibility and power, but also engagement and likability. And so it's really important when you're thinking about whether you're in work or business or romantic situations, how can you use both of those things? And I think that means always talking about subjects that you feel both credible and warm about. So no matter if you're doing a job interview or you're answering questions on a date, think of stories and answers that make you feel warm and excited and passionate, but also like you know what you're talking about. And that means not lying, right? That means telling the truth. And that means sharing things that truly mean something to you. And if you can just stick with that, if you can stick with those stories and those answers, your body language will follow. Your charisma will come very naturally.
Right. It's like people who lack confidence until they get on their favorite topic, whether it be software development or Star Wars, and all of a sudden light up.
That is exactly it. And I want hopefully everyone who's listening to be able to light up and know what lights them up as opposed to it happening accidentally.
Absolutely. So Vanessa, I want to ask you 2 more rapid fire questions before I let you go. The first one is, what are some books that you would recommend on the subject?
Yes, body language specifically. I love anything by Joe Navarro, but I really like What Every Body is Saying. It's a great body language book. And then I would say, in terms of, do you want another body language book, or do you want like a people skills book?
A people skills book would be great.
I really like Malcolm Gladwell's Blink. And I know that that's not technically a people skills book, but I will tell you that the first impression science talks about in there really helps. It's people skills in a nutshell. So even though that isn't a typical people skills book, it's extremely helpful for how you deal with people.
Yeah, it's a great read. Absolutely. Second rapid fire question is, who are some people in the public who you would recommend watching for their body language?
Ooh, I think that Marie Forleo does a really good job with her nonverbal. She's a female entrepreneur. She runs something called B School. I'm actually not a student of B School, but I watch Marie TV, and she does a really good job of, as I mentioned, that warmth and competence where you know that she's credible and you know that she truly loves what she's talking about. And so she just has this massive following, and it's not hard to understand why. So I really enjoy her nonverbal as well as her messaging. And I think that I actually have a video. It's a funny video on the 7 experts and how we can learn from their body language. And so Marie Forleo's in there, Danielle Laporte, Chris Carr, Tim Ferriss, Ramit Sethi, and Chris Guillebeau are all in there. They all have great body language. And what I do is in that video, I pull out their one body language power move. So like Ramit's is the eyebrow raise.
Oh, yeah.
And I show how he uses that. And Chris Guillebeau uses movement really well. So anyway, if you're an expert junkie like me, you can watch that video and figure out what everyone's power move is, signature power move.
Absolutely. And actually, I think we'll post it in the show notes and share that video, which is a great segue to my last question. I know I've taken more than enough of your time today. So if people want to get in touch with you, where should we send them?
Yeah, scienceofpeople.com. And that's where we have all of our videos and articles. You can also play in our lab. We're always posting crazy experiments that you can do quizzes or watch videos for us. And so you can play around in the lab, which we love and very much appreciate.
That is awesome. And we will also post that in the show notes. Vanessa, it's been such a pleasure speaking to you today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's stay in touch, Vanessa. It's been really a pleasure. And I'll see you around on Udemy.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I would love it.
Awesome. Take care, Vanessa.
Bye.
So that's it for this week's episode, guys. I hope you've thoroughly enjoyed it. And if you have, I would love to answer your questions live on Periscope. So please feel free to download the app periscope.tv and follow me. My username is entrepreneur, ENTREPRENEWER, entrepreneur. So I'd love to hear from you guys either on Periscope or on Twitter. The Q&As are completely free, and it's my pleasure to answer your questions on learning, productivity, life hacks, any of that great stuff. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes. It makes all the difference in the world. And we look forward to seeing you guys again next week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.